Hey y'all, it's Maritime in America again, a podcast where we're charting America's offshore stories. It's the only podcast that highlights mariners' perspectives on issues facing the offshore community and the greater U.S. maritime community. I'm your host, Aaron Smith of the Offshore Marine Service Association. Each Friday, I'll bring you the Offshore Briefing, a quick rundown of the week's notable developments, updates, and news you need to know in the offshore space. In addition, we'll feature a special guest from the maritime world, bringing a mariner's voice and real-world perspectives straight to the show. Joining me are my co-hosts, Ashley and Angelle, where we'll strengthen the maritime American mariner's voice by diving into the people, policies, and powerful currents shaping the U.S. maritime community. Whether you're on deck or at your desk, we're glad you're here.
All right, and welcome, Bill. Thanks for joining us so much. Bill Purvis, Captain Bill Purvis. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning. So, Bill, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself, but I think first, I think this is Ashley's guest, so I want to give her the chance to introduce Bill first, and then why you wanted to bring Bill in.
So, Bill, for the 100th time, I tell him every time I see him, I've said it on here, is one of my favorite members for a multitude of reasons. For this podcast, we like to showcase the mariner, right? Like, we like to talk about our guys out there and what they're doing and how they got into this industry. But there's so much that Bill Purvis does that just every time he says something, I'm like, how do you have time for that? He's just such a good person. He really makes me question a lot of the things I do and should do better. I always take away some sort of parenting lessons when we do these podcasts. So I definitely take parenting lessons from Bill, in addition, just how to be a wonderful human being. Fun fact, Bill introduced me to, what's it called? Moonshine. I'm still scarred from it. Never had it before.
I'm going to start a tracker for how many times on this podcast you have mentioned some form of drinking. We're approaching every finger I have and every toe I have, I believe.
I know. I'm sorry. I have fun with the members.
Yes.
But so I'm very excited for everyone knows Bill, I feel like, or at least our membership does, but for the rest of the world to really hear Bill's story, because he really is, just outside of just being an awesome person for industry, just a genuinely fabulous person. So that was my plug.
I would agree outside of moonshine. I would agree with everything about that. But Bill, why don't you introduce yourself here?
Well, in my defense, the moonshine was an accident.
I don't know how that's a defense.
And it was an accident that I drank it too.
Yeah, all right, sure.
Well, where do I begin? Look, my name is Bill Purvis, and I've been in this industry since 1979. Went to Morgan City for the first time. Actually, with aspirations of getting a job on a drilling rig, being a derrickman. When I was a kid in high school, I rolled some pipe up in the oil fields of North Louisiana, and they always said, with them long arms, you ought to go be a derrickman offshore. I never considered offshore in boats. Never thought about it. There's no supply boats in the Shreveport, Bossier area. And so I went to Morgan City and jumped in one of them roustabout camps, just trying to find my way, trying to find a job on a drilling rig. And Mr. Glenn Holloway Propellers, just happened to pick me up one day and went and moved Tiger Island Fuel. And he just liked the way I worked. And he told me he had a buddy, had a boat company, and wanted to know if I wanted to be a deckhand. I told him, I really want to go on a drilling rig. He said, think about it for a couple of days and give me a call. So I thought about it. And then he took me over to Bruce Boat Rentals in Gibson, Louisiana. And Todd Broussard gave me a job when I started out on the motor vessel Fortuna. Got on it in Berwick, Louisiana in September of 1979. I'm still waiting on that perfect drilling rig job to come along.
I don't think yeah. So so you were deckhand on the Fortuna. What was the Fortuna? What kind
The
of boat was it?
Fortune, it was a 125-foot Swisher crew boat with a set of MTUs in it. The MTU's first go around into the Americas and the oil patch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they weren't too successful with those. Most of those boats were repowered eventually.
What made you want to be on the drill ship on the rig rather than just that's all you knew?
That's just all I knew. Just hey, want to give it a shot.
Yeah.
So so my career kind of found me. Really. I think for most of us, I think our careers find us. You grow up thinking this, and then something comes along, and hey, it just seems to work out.
Hey,
For
I
sure.
certainly didn't think I would end up in Louisiana myself, but I think I married right, so that's how I got here. So,
Oh, you
but
outkicked your coverage is what you did.
oh,
For
totally
sure.
outkicked my
And
coverage,
for the
except in
record,
technology space.
yeah, I repel technology. Jesus, do I repel technology? Everything else I'm far superior. We can get into our car ride this weekend anyway, later to tell you how more superior I am. But keep going, Bill.
Well,
So
I
go
do
ahead,
think
Aaron.
there is kind of a common theme in this, and yes, careers that find you is one of the common themes that I've found so far in this podcast. But it really does show that even from the 70s, and I would say in the 20s today, the same thing is evident, is that we do not do a good job of highlighting the great careers that are in this industry. And so that even a kid from Louisiana, now granted North Louisiana, but it's still Louisiana, doesn't know about the great jobs that this industry can provide. And I think that's true in 79, and I think that's true in 2025, unfortunately.
Well,
So,
that's why I asked that question because what made you
yes.
be like, the rig is you don't see that, it's offshore. So what made you think that's what I want to do rather than be on the vessels and do it? That's all. Because I have, of all the people that we've chatted with, no one's ever said that my goal was to go out on a rig but I did this instead. It's always
Mhm.
been, I just saw it just happened. So you knew you wanted to go offshore. It was just a different path.
Right. Yeah, I never associated boats and drilling rigs. I just never connected it.
Yeah.
It was offshore. Didn't give a thought about how you got offshore. It's just going offshore.
So tell me then about your career progression. You go on as a deckhand on a crew boat there. Tell me what comes next. Where did you work your way up to? How did that process work?
Well, I just was a deckhand for a while, then kind of went into the engine room of the crew boats. And I was working for Comar at the time, and they needed a wheelman on a seismograph boat, the old Sea General. And the captain took a liking to me, so I was put up as a wheelman and was running around the shallow waters of Louisiana doing this back down drag, which is horrible, horrible work. Any of the old timers will tell you back down drag is about the worst seismic work you can do.
Okay, I pride myself on knowing a lot of terms in this industry, but I don't even know that one. What's a back
Me
down
neither.
drag
Me
operation?
neither.
So we were towing 2 miles of cable behind us on these course lines, and you would pull up, get the cable straightened out. You'd probably be crabbing 35, 40 degrees half the time. You would stop back down, let the cable settle on the ocean floor. They would fire the guns, and you would get it back underway. And you would do this like every 90 seconds, 2 minutes, and it was just brutal trying to stay on the course line. But
Oh yeah,
talks a little bit about boat handling and set and drift.
yeah, yeah. So you were basically sideways the whole time then, almost,
Pretty
because if
much.
you're driving a boat sideways constantly. So
Yeah.
interesting.
I was either sideways with the boat or sideways with the client, but I was always sideways with the
Well put. I like that. So you work your way. That's interesting. So you initially went down to the engine room but then decided that the wheelhouse path was more for you then.
Oh yeah, I was too social being in the engine room, you know.
I can see that.
Uh, well, that's good. When did you get, well, and actually, let me say it this way, because I saw something on your resume that is an interesting term that I don't think many people understand or know. So on your resume, you say you have a captain's license, 6th issue. People don't understand what that means. Explain what 6th issue is.
That means I got my first license in 1981, and I renewed that license 6 times throughout the career.
That
And
I
then
don't think, and so a license is good for 5 years. So you think
5
you
years.
renew it. You renew it. If you renew it 6 times, that means you've had your license for 30 years.
Right.
That is pretty cool. I don't know if I've seen many 6 issues.
Did you
Well, there's a
always renew
few.
it on time?
There's a few of them left. Most of my peers are retiring and hanging it up now, but not me. I didn't renew my license last go around mainly because of all the bridge resource management and all the additional training would require, and the fact that I haven't really sailed much in the last 15, 16 years other than some sea trials and stuff, and it just wasn't worth renewing it and going through the training. I wish I'd kept it instead of letting it go. And then when the Coast Guard opened up that little opportunity of 5 years, you could get your license back. I was just right outside that threshold to put it back in pocket with it. But it was a nice security blanket for me. I always thought, well, if I ever don't like this, I just go back on the boats, But
Well, and so I think that, you and we've had a lot of good conversations over the years about what we can do to keep good people in this industry, keep people like yourself in this industry. And, I know you and I have had lots of conversations about how the Coast Guard inadvertently drives people from this industry. You want to, say any bit about that? Because, yeah, you're still in the industry. That's great. But, yeah, you can't sail. And if you didn't, if you weren't someone that liked working in the shipyard and is great working in the shipyard, we would have lost you too. So, can you explain, what how we can do better at keeping people in this industry?
that's such a loaded question. I think a lot of it just boils down to what area are these guys working in? What are they trying to achieve? If you're gonna sail in the Gulf of Mexico, and you don't need all these requirements that you're doing if you're going international. The tonnage games, that has a lot to do with it. You take a vessel and you put a bunch of deep frames in it, all of a sudden you can get by with a 200-ton license. And then that guy's out there competing with a guy who needs a 500-ton license, and these vessels are competing for these same jobs because of some of the tonnage issues or tonnage laws, I guess is a better way.
Yeah, and for anyone that doesn't know, I know on the podcast we've talked about this before about vessels are classed based upon their tonnage. But it's not how much the vessel weighs, it's how much the vessel could theoretically carry. And there are all these little things you could do. You can open a hatch, and if you open this little hatch, it means that now that is not an enclosed space, and therefore that space doesn't count towards the vessel's tonnage. And so a vessel that should be 500 tons can be 100 tons. Just by these little tonnage tricks. And I think our industry's kind of been built upon tonnage tricks. And there's so much money and so much time that goes into 99 tons versus 101 tons when it's the same damn boat. And so I completely agree. And those things in every one of those levels, 100 ton, 200 ton, 500 ton, 1600 ton, 3200 ton, involves another class of license, another set of courses, another set of assessments when you're doing the same thing. And then when you think, back to that seismic boat you were talking about, you're doing a very technical, detailed operation. What was the tonnage of that vessel? I bet it wasn't 1,600.
It was a 100-ton vessel.
Yeah. So
Uninspected.
you're doing a dangerous, complex operation.
And I didn't
with
need a
those-
captain's license. I was running wheelman. It was 12 hours a day on wheel without a captain's license, So,
No, it's just we've created all of these artificial barriers that just keep someone from achieving a good career, and we need to get rid of it.
And
You-
correct
and
me
the
if I'm
other-
wrong, but the inland vessels, their tonnage is completely different, right? Like inland
Right.
tugs, towboats, all that. So
Inland
why are the
license
two
is
so
completely
different?
Yeah.
Correct. So that, having had worked in the inland and then coming over here 13 years ago, I find the discrepancy in that even more infuriating. There's no reason to it.
I was thinking about this morning. I was running as a wheelman on that seismograph boat, running all over the Gulf of Mexico. I was able to get a 100-ton license off of that, but I couldn't get a Z card back then. I was a licensed captain, a 100-ton captain, but I could not get a Z card because you had to have a job on a vessel that was over 100 gross tons, so 300-ton supply boat. You had to have a job to get the Z card, but you had to have the Z card to get the job. So
Bill?
finally you had to get somebody to write you a letter saying, "Hey, I'm gonna hire this guy." So that's how I got my Z card. I got somebody to give me a letter saying they weren't going to hire me, put me on a supply boat. So I had a captain's license before I had a merchant marriner's document. I still got that original document too in my briefcase. Had a little more hair and a little skinnier back then.
Can you tell me what the Z card is?
It's a merchant mariner's document.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's now called an MMC, but that's a good point, Angelle, is that a lot of people still refer to them as Z cards, but it's not a term that some it is not a technical term anymore, so a lot of people don't know it, but it's
It ages people, apparently.
Yeah, I'm dated.
Yes, dated.
The first Z card was chiseled in stone.
No.
Well, I still have it. It weighed 47 pounds.
Well, hey, when it was chiseled in stone, you didn't have to worry about a Coast Guard printer going down and therefore stopping all license issues from being
That's
added. So maybe we need to go back to that if the Coast Guard can't keep its printer up and running. But another thing you pointed out, and I like this point as well, is that this ridiculous notion we have in the United States, we have a national license. And then we have an international license that follows the international conventions. Makes sense. If you're working here, you abide by these rules. If you're working elsewhere, you abide by the international rules. But then all of a sudden we've decided, well, for most of the national jobs, you actually need the international license. Why? You're not in the international service. You're just 20 miles from shore.
I was going to say,
Why do you
most,
keep doing
most of
this?
them never even get 200 miles offshore in their career.
Yeah. So why, like, I can't understand. And it's not just licenses. It's everything else. It's MARPOL. It's labor conventions. It's everything we've adapted all of these international standards and said they have to apply to domestic service. Why? You're not international. You don't need to be. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
But I'm not that smart.
And look, it drives up the cost of doing business for everybody.
Yes.
It drives up the cost of doing business for the operators. It drives up the cost for the crew members to get their license and get their documents. And at the same token, everybody's screaming anti-Jones Act. They're trying to do away with the Jones Act, but they attack it every way you can. That's probably a horse of a different color for me, because I'll get on that bandwagon and you'll kick me off the air.
Not on this channel.
Not on this air.
That's it. But the Jones Act's important to us. I mean, it truly is. And some of these operators, I would just say they circumvent it sometimes, where they choose to do their dry dockings. So.
Yep. Oh, that is certainly, I certainly know that and understand that. And yeah, the rules that have been created on what a repair or modification is, you know, those sound like such easy terms, you know,
Yeah.
because a U.S. flag vessel cannot be repaired or modified in a foreign yard and keep its coastwise privileges. But then you have, oh, well, if you've only touched 7% and we're going to, you know, or under 7%, and then you're going to have this, you got to have a freaking calculus degree to understand what 7% is 7%. I mean, it seems like, you know, 7% of a vessel is 7%. Well, no, excluding this and that and this and this and this. And
Kinda
yeah,
like the
you
tonnage
take that
laws.
work, you take that work somewhere else in a yard that can't compete with the rules that are the yards that don't have to abide by the rules that y'all have to abide by. And it you know, yeah, it undercuts your yard and it undercuts the shipbuilding industry. And yeah, people
You know, and
go ahead.
it adds a lost labor, lost skill sets. You
Mhm.
know, for every vessel that's dry docked in a foreign port, you know, that's less work up here. You know, then they holler
Yes.
whether the yards aren't fast enough. Well, maybe the yard's not fast enough because you want to show up here for 5 or 6 years and do everything else overseas. You know,
Yeah.
look, and
Yeah.
I understand that there's a necessity for some of them to do it, but a lot of them are just choice. You know,
Mhm.
when you tow a dredge from the United States of America down to Tampico, an open water treasure with a dredge, you know, that's a choice.
Yes. I completely understand. And if we're gonna, you know, it's one of those things that you got to be, and OMSA takes a lot of hits a lot of times for being too pure on the Jones Act, and I wear that as a badge of honor. Yeah, we're pure.
Absolutely. You
Yeah,
know,
Someone
we're
called him Mr. Jones because they literally thought his last name, they forgot his last name was Smith because he always
Yeah.
talked about the Jones Act.
Oh,
Our
I
friends
put that.
even
Yeah.
jokingly will put on text messages, be like, Aaron, how does this affect the Jones Act? And it'll be something totally like, it'll be about like the dinner that we got or something stupid.
I always have an answer though.
that's it.
Normally, this would be my time to tell Aaron to get to stop nerding out and to dial back into the conversation about you. Usually it's about DP stuff.
Yeah.
But I do, you know, I do want to get, while we have nerded out on the Jones Act, and I appreciate that, and that will never be a fault. I do want to get back to, because you have a great career, and I want to get back to that because it does exemplify all of the opportunities that are in this industry. And what I think is really cool is you have worked for two just amazing companies through the majority of your career, and they're two companies that I think typify our industry: family owned, family operated, and they operate as a family. And so can you talk about Aries Marine and Thomas E Shipyards, or Thomas E Marine Constructors?
Right. Absolutely. You know, I spent 21 years at Aries Marine. And yeah, my wife just used to describe it as Bo Ramsey. He was one of the nicest people she ever met in her life. You know, Bo Ramsey
they're a
was such a
wonderful family.
class. He's
Mhm.
class act. You know, Courtney. I can't say enough good about Courtney. I mean, it really was. It was a good spot for me to be for a long time. You know, when I started over there, we just had 2 supply boats, and they had the lift boat division, which I didn't have anything to do with the lift boats. You know, and look, Richard Johnson ran a phenomenal division over there with the lift boats. You know, their safety record was beyond reproach. And I always gave Richard credit for that, for the way he handled that division with Aries Marine. No, they had 2 supply boats when I went to work for them. I went to work for them in the downtime. So whichever boat was working, that's the boat I was on. And we just straight time it, you know, 60, 90, 120 days, whatever it took until the boat got released. And I was always a straight timer. And being a straight timer was probably good for me because I was kind of I know it's hard to believe it, I was a little wild in my youth. You know.
I was like, never
Shot.
guessed that.
Yeah, I know it's a newsflash. It's a shocker, but no, but really it is. You know, Aries Marine. You know, we went from a 2 boat supply boat company. We built the very first of the now it's the VAR design, but it was originally an Acker design with Eastern Marine. So we built the very first two. The Dwight S. Ramsey. I remember telling Bo, I said, I was just looking at these drawings, Earl Verrett and myself, and I just told Bo, I said, this boat's as big as an aircraft carrier. And so I wanted to take a play off Dwight Eisenhower and Dwight Ramsey. And I said, look, name the Dwight S. Ramsey, and that's what they chose to do. So, and the second vessel was named the Betty Fan Coup after Court Ramsey's mother. And that Fan Coup was a tough one for people to pronounce on the radio. They really it's a rock solid company. There's good people over there.
They are. And those vessels were in, nothing to the Kylie and to the Abigail. Those are great boats. But that kind of those class of the Dwight and the Betty, and those were the first of that class. And they looked like a modern boat. Yes. All of a sudden it was a different shape, and it looked like a different part of the industry. I always thought.
Yeah. I got the freeze-ons just even talking about them. We were probably 9 months into that build cycle. I'm just sitting there looking at a drawing one day, and it's like, what is missing? I knew something was missing off that boat, and I just couldn't figure it out. I just kept thinking. And we'd focus a lot on creature comforts for the crew. Being a captain, coming off the boats, I always thought that the crews deserved a little better sleeping conditions and some privacy for showers and bathrooms and things of that sort. And we'd focus so much on that stuff, we failed to put a head in the common area. So for like the guys coming on the back deck, stuff, there was no bathroom for them to use without going into somebody's stateroom. Yeah. So we ended up, the laundry room on the starboard side, we ended up giving up a washer and dryer and putting a little shower and a head in there for the people coming off the back deck.
Yeah. That is some cool knowledge right there. And that's what I love about this industry is you have these people that are making these design decisions, and they're not making them because they've been a naval arc or they were trained as a naval arc or they have a master's degree in something. They're making those decisions because they've been in that role and they understand. And I think our industry is great because of that, is because we have that hawsepipe style knowledge. So then that means when the Dwight and the Betty were coming out, then you had gone ashore then, correct?
Yeah, I'd been ashore. I went ashore in 94 when Aries started their expansion. We picked up 3 boats from what was the original Hornbeck fleet. And those vessels were originally part of the Petromar fleet by the Hunt brothers. It was the Dapper Dan, the John Henry, and the Omaha. And we purchased them, went through them, did some liquid mud conversions, did bow thruster conversions, ended up repowering them with some EMDs. And they were named the Chris V, the Lauren E, which was after Earl's 2 kids, and the Chris V, Lauren E, and the Shelby C. And the Shelby C was one of Bo Ramsey's friends, grandkids or something like that. That's how that name came about. And then, we put those boats to work for ADTI, which any old-timer boat captain just loved, applied drilling technology in their turnkey jobs. We put them to work over there, and then we were able to sign a deal with Halter Marine at the time, and they had 2 hulls left over, 2 kills left over from the oil and gas days, because the other brothers had they built some 220s before Hornbeck, before Larry Hornbeck bought those vessels out. So we picked up those 2 kills, made them DP2. We got the first Kongsberg DP planning station and the last Simrad Robinson planning station on those 2 boats. We converted them to Z drives, so we built the first supply boats with Alpha Master Z drives in them. It kind of took off through that. Then we ended up building the Kylie and the Abigail with Thomasy, and that's how I met Mr. Robert and Walter Thomasy. Let me finish those boats up.
Go ahead. Go
Things were
ahead.
going well. We signed a deal with Eastern to build it too. So, when we signed the deal with Eastern to build it too, that kind of opened the door, for the Hornbeck followed suit, Harvey Gull
Mhm.
followed building all those vessels. And those were the ones that really kind of revolutionized the industry in the class of vessels.
They really did, and they also, it's kind of, you kind of have a bifurcated, or maybe three-way now kind of vessel design, where you either have those master boat looking vessels, you have the Tiger Shark class, the Eastern, what people know as the Eastern class of vessels, or then you have the Schwest boats. And they each have that distinctive look to them, and it's kind of, you have those three, and you can kind of see, despite the paint color, that was a master boat. It probably came from the ACO fleet, and or you have now some Schwest boats that have different colors on them, or you have the Eastern boats, and so you can. It's kind of weird how the industry was so diversified. Now you kind of have three lanes there, outside of that. And then, haven't seen any supply boats coming out lately from Thomasy, but you also have the Harvey Hawk and the Harvey, which was the other one now? I forget.
Oh, the Harvey Hawk, the Falcon, I guess the Falcon, because they built several boats for GOL. Now, the two finest vessels that Thomasy ever built for OSV wise is the States Tide and the Southern Tide.
Yes.
Water Marine. Had 2014 not happened, there probably would have been several more of those things out there. Yeah.
Those were a good looking style of boats too. The kind of that, I know that wheelhouse style too, and it's a good looking boat too. So, but yeah, the
deadweight was the most in that class of vessel too. So.
Well, and now this is when Ashley should be talking about nerding out, that I'm talking about what different wheelhouse styles look like
because I find this stuff fascinating.
Oh, it's just when we get into
Because I
dynamic
like the design aspect of it. I think all that's really cool to me.
So, but then, you go from Aries and you go to another, like I said, just another great company in our industry in Thomasy, and talk about that process and talk about what you do for them now.
Oh God,
What don't you do?
Yeah.
It's
that should really be it.
I came over. Of course, Thomasy had been building new vessels for a while, and they got into the repair side of things. And after my tenure with Aries was up, my call Walter was chatting with him, and he wanted somebody to handle sales and marketing, and try to build up the repair business just because of new people. And I understood that aspect of new construction and repairing vessels. And that's kind of how it started, just doing sales calls and traveling around. The very first thing I did when I came to work for Thomasy is we joined OMSA. I mean, that was like day one Thomasy, day two OMSA. And been
what year
married
was
to the
that?
hip. That was in 2012. April of 2012. 2012.
It's about the time you joined OMSA.
Yep.
Yeah, I started AMSA September 2013.
2012.
Nope, 2012.
Yeah. So it was in April of 12 that we joined OMSA.
Smart move, my friend. Smart move.
Absolutely. I mean, it's probably the most brilliant thing I've ever done in my career.
Agree.
But so I was challenged with just building up the repair side of things, and I was having pretty good luck with it. And every once in a while, as problems go on the shipyard, things happen. There'd be some issues on a vessel, and they'd get me involved to help deliver it, get it across the line, and the same thing on the repair side. Walter would pull me off, hey, I need you to go take care of this. And so it became quasi project management, turnaround specialist, and doing sales. And then in 2017, we was awarded our first job with the Coast Guard on the Black Hulls. And, and then I inherited the Coast Guard repair projects. And as crazy as it sounds, I just kind of fell in love with it. We've had a Coast Guard vessel in the yard almost constantly since then. We did several of the black holes. We got our first FRC 2.5 years ago, and I enjoy working with the Coast Guard. I enjoy following the careers of the young men and young women that come through the yard. I've seen guys come in, talking about getting out, and just talk to them, just say what's going on in life, why you want to get out. Because I tell them, I don't know anybody who did 10 or 12 years in the military that got out, that 20 years later go, dang, I shouldn't have done that. I should have stayed. So it gives me an opportunity to pour into the servicemen of our country as well.
Well, and that there's a few ways I want to take that, but I do want to. I think, and I can't believe that I'm saying this sentence. It sounds so weird, but I know. Well, why don't you tell everyone first? Why don't you tell everyone what you do Friday mornings?
Well, every Friday morning, and this has been going on for 8 years now, and it started out with just me and one of my accountability partners for church, a couple of guys. We'd get together on Friday mornings and eat breakfast and talk about life, and just know, hey, what do you see in me that I don't see? What do I need to change that I don't see? And it kind of started like that. It was just, hey, keeping each other in check. We are a brother's keeper. And then somebody said, do you mind if I join you on Friday? It was like, I'm not so sure about this. It's kind of, I said, no, come on. And it just evolved, so every Friday morning, there's 30 to 40 men getting together, having breakfast, having a little fellowship, talking about life, sharing a little of the Bible, and just communicating, working on being better, building strong communities, getting young guys, hopefully, that they won't make some of the mistakes some of those others got.
This is why
Make a
I love
difference
you,
to
Bill.
somebody's life. There we go.
This is just literally when
I
you told me
I
that
do
you
this
did
as
that.
well.
Yeah.
And what I think is so cool, and this is what I can't believe that I'm saying, but I think that if we keep going and we keep talking, and we talked about it last episode with Calvin Gaines, is just what I love about this industry is how these aren't just, it's not career mentoring, it's life mentoring and, being a good person mentoring. And I don't know of another industry where I see that, where you see people coming in and helping not only them be a good worker or be a good hand or be a good captain, but being a good person, being a good man. And I think that's what's really cool about this. And I would bet there is a tie between your Friday fellowships and how you worked as a captain. Would you agree?
Yeah. I was probably a little harsher. Probably. I was kind of a tough bird to work for at times, and I'll admit it.
I don't know anyone like that.
Yeah, I could. It was
Seriously.
there was a chain of command. Ownership of the vessel. I got fired from a job one time for taking ownership of a vessel, and this is in 1982. I was working straight time. I was working for Arco down in Ingleside, Texas. And they called me up and said, look, I need you to go home this week. We hired a guy, and we need to put him somewhere for a week or so until we can get him worked in rotation. And like, who is it? And he told me the guy's name. I said, oh, no, you don't want that guy. I'm telling you, trust me, you don't want this guy. Well, you don't have a choice. Well, they hired him, and I had to go home, take my 2 weeks off. Well, when I get back to the boat, there's a nice little hole in the forepeak of the vessel where we had broached the Port Aransas jetties. And so I called the owner up and look, I'll tell you, it was Will Galloway with Galaxy Marine, the Starfleet Marine. And to this day, I let him have it, both barrels, and hung up. Then 2 weeks later, I'm on the platform and I'm calling for crew change for the guys. And I tell them, at the time I was making $95 a day, and the going rate for a 100-ton captain was $100. And I'm telling Will, I can see this day. Well, you need to be paying me $100 a day. I'm worth it. I just have done forgot about letting him have it with both barrels. And to this day, I can see him with his feet on his desk with that pink slip. Wait, yeah, I got you $100, buddy. He showed up that night in Ingleside, Texas, and I had no job.
Well,
I'm
He hired
waiting
me
for that
back.
day for me. Do you think that
He hired me back. So I guess I wasn't that bad a guy. But
No.
yeah, but
Do you
that's
think that any of that, maybe you said you were harsh or strict. Do you think that maybe it's from your military background?
no, I've always been company minded and vessel minded. And one of the most backhanded compliments I think I ever received from a crew member was, "I hate your guts, but I'll sail with you anywhere in the world because I know you're not going to kill me." And we were cowboys in the late
yeah,
'70s, early '80s, up until the early '90s. That was before all the DP systems came out. We were live boating everything. We were dropping anchor and
hmm
backing up drilling rigs, catching a 3-point spread. Or if you couldn't drop the anchor, you're in there with just catching 2 lines and pulling on them. And it was dangerous. It was dangerous work to get these boats offloaded and keep those drilling rigs going. And I prided myself in my boat handling. I don't think I've ever done a position moving myself. And we'd have customers calling and talking to Earl about, I'm going back to Aries days. Do you have the vessel have a DP system? He said, no, we got something better. We got a BP system. And that was it.
That's Bill Purvis.
Yeah. And I don't know how many miles of cable I laid, for the government, live boating or picking up satellites off the ocean floor out of Port Hueneme, California, with just always live boating, before they had the DP
yeah.
systems. When they first started using ROVs, we were live boating all that stuff.
That is crazy to think about, holding a vessel in position with an ROV in the water, just with hands on the chrome. But I think you bring up a
Walking
good
divers.
point.
We used to walk divers. Divers jump off the bow of the boat, and you follow the bubbles as they walk the pipelines. Try that today.
And I think there's something that, and I will say, I don't understand this, Ashley, Angelle. I don't think we understand this. But, there is a test in our industry of someone's competency, and it is, are you willing to go to sleep with that guy or that girl at the helm? And, that is we can design any sort of competency. The Coast Guard can design any sort of test they want, but that's the test, that's the real test. And And so can you talk about that concept, Bill? And, that was kind of what you were striving for?
Yeah. It's, I didn't sleep a whole lot when I was working on the boats. I could cat nap here and there, and I still don't sleep a whole lot today. But, your crew members have to know that you're not going to kill them. You're not going to run over stuff. You're going to look out for their best interests. And you have to instill that confidence in them. I mean, it's easy to do. And I'm probably going to step on some toes here. We see these, I used to talk about these guys have, the dog was named Captain. They had Captain license plates. They lived on Captain Drive. You can't talk to me that way. I'm a captain. Well, no, Cap, guess what? But,
Yep. I've heard that, and I know I've heard it from people other than you. But yeah, that guy with everything named Captain, that's the guy you don't want to give a. There's one, yeah.
That's it. And I used to tell the captains that work for us over at Aries, don't sit at the dock and tell us it's too rough. Don't you dare. You throw the line, you make sure your cargo's secured, you throw the lines off, and you go give it a shot. Once you've given it a shot, if you can't make it, I'm going to back you up 100%. But until then, better throw them lines off and get underway, boy.
Well, and I think another thing that I've always thought, and I think about working with you, Bill, is just and I think people don't understand this about the industry, and we talk about it a lot. But people don't understand is you are devoted family man. And I think, I don't think people understand how much this industry, like I said before, you have family run companies and companies that are run like a family. And then you also have companies that understand family is important and always provide for family. Can you talk about how, your commitment there?
And I have a quick question before. Is that the reason? Because I honestly should know this, or I just don't know this if we've ever talked about it. Is that the reason that you wanted to transition, or was it just a natural transition from offshore to onshore to Thomasine? Is it because your family,
No,
or just happened?
really, I came ashore. I actually took a pay cut to come ashore, and I came ashore because I thought in the long run it would be better. It's a better career opportunity. I could go further. I could do more, and that's what made me come ashore. And of course, a lot of guys on the boats, I've got been married more than once. Been married 25 years this time to my wife. We've got a blended family of 8 kids. We have 7 daughters, 1 son. So we've got all these
itching right
daughters.
now.
You talk
We've
about
got-
how you don't have any, you don't have enough, you had more hair before. How do you have any hair?
It's really been part of the greatest joy of my life, is watching these kids grow up. So we got a slew of kids from the 6 oldest daughters will go from 30 to 40 now. Our son just made 21, and we have a 13-year-old. As I call it,
And
the
that's
last of
how
the
you and
Monkeys.
I started chit chatting when I started AMSA and you joined
Yeah.
from Thomasine. It's because we have a 13-year-old as well, Campbell, and I would bring her around. They're the same age.
So, but it's oh God, probably the toughest challenge of my life was blending the family and trying to blend career. For a long time, my family was on second burn. I was on the back burner. The company needs me, the boat needs me. I gotta go. If I could do that all over again in life, I would. But on the same token, both good and bad, no matter what I've done, everything I've ever did, every decision ever made, put me right where I am today, and I wouldn't change a thing.
That's
I
awesome.
really wouldn't change a thing about my life.
That's a good way to live. And I've always admired how, and, I've certainly taken some lessons from you in terms of watching you, how you be a father and how you be a man. So I've always appreciated that. And I love that. Again, I love that about our industry. And you don't think about an industry where you're away so much. And Angelle has talked about this with her dad too, where you're away so much, but you can be so committed to your family. And I think that that's something that people need to understand about this industry, because I've always found, and like Ashley said, she used to, I can remember when I was working in a different role, and, I couldn't watch the kid, and Ashley was bringing a 6-month-old to an AMSA conference. And everyone was just like, that's what you got to do. Let's roll.
Seriously.
I don't think anyone ever mentioned it. That's just a cool thing about this.
And when they were sick, we would bring them to the conferences. They just, I think, Bill, you embody someone that just really, how do I put this? You're just so secure with your feelings, and you just don't let things rile you, which I need to be more like. And I see that in the way you work, and because I've been in meetings, we've had meetings and committee meetings back in the day where it would get all heated and people would go back and forth, but you were just so to the point of this is what it is kind of thing, and that's just such a remarkable quality.
It takes a while to learn that. It's what they say.
I don't know if I ever will.
Yeah, you gain wisdom by making stupid decisions. Uh, and I still make mistakes. I still make this poor decisions sometimes. But I always clarify with, hey, I'm gonna screw up again. I'm just not gonna screw up like that. I try not to make the same mistake.
That's what I always say. Why make the same mistake when there's so many new and interesting mistakes you can make?
It keeps you young.
Yeah.
Bill, has any of your 8 kids followed in your footsteps and got involved with the industry?
Yes, I've got one of my daughters who is a free spirit. I mean, just as free spirited as they come. She sold everything she owned, bought a one-way ticket to Byra, Indonesia, several years ago, to go work on a dive boat, a liveaboard, and get her to become a master diver. So when her visa ran out in Indonesia, she flew back to Hawaii, was working on dive boats, got her 100-ton captain's license, started doing deliveries and sailing around. And she's down in Miami, and I don't know if she's on a dive boat, she's on a yacht, what she's doing. She calls when she calls, and she doesn't when she doesn't. But she's unfortunately for me, she's a lot like I was when I was younger. So there's still hope.
That's cool, though.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
That means
Yeah,
she's having
and
a good life, though.
Oh yeah, look, the one thing about Whitney is she's never gonna say she didn't do what she wanted to do. If she decides she wants to go to South America, she just goes. I mean, she's a total free spirit. And then my son, he jumped on the inland tow vessels this spring, so he's probably on his 4th hitch, and he's doing well with it. Boys making more as a deckhand than I ever made on my license. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the good thing about it, it's a phenomenal career for people, and people don't understand it. The company he went to work for put him for a week of training here in their office. He got through that week of training. Then they sent him to DeGallo with some firefighting training, went through some water survival training. Then they sent him to Houston, out in the Channel View area in the fleet, learning how to make and break tow. So that's quite a bit of money. Take somebody and not know whether they're going to make it, not know anything about them. You get through the first week, you go to the second week. You get through the second week, you go to the third week. And I'm just tickled to death that he's doing it. I wish he'd done it before we had 2.5 years of college, but that's he was ready. He was ready to get on with his life. He said, "Dad," he says, "I want to get on with my life." He looked at becoming a petroleum land manager, and he said, "Dad," he says, "I get around some of these guys," and he says, I feel like I need a shower when I'm done." And he says, "I want to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem." And so he's looking out a career path of what he wants to do with that company, and he's going back to school online while he's at work, and there's company assistance for that for him. I mean, so he's in a phenomenal spot, and at a good starting spot for a 21-year-old kid.
Angelle, that was a great question. And I do think it's so interesting how many, and it shows what this industry, that this is such a great industry, because you have so many kids that follow their parents into this. And, again, we got to do a better job about showing what a great industry this is to be in, so we don't have to only rely upon kids. Parents can't be our only source of marketing here. So we got to do a better job, because as you've shown, it's a great play. It's a great industry, not only to progress your professional career, but also to progress as a person. And I've always found that, and I always feel that is so important. But Bill, we've taken so much of your time today, but I wanted to see if you have any last words, any final thoughts for the podcast here.
Yeah, this industry, while it can be tough at times, it's rewarding. It's allowed me to provide an environment where my children could thrive, my wife we made a decision that when we get married, she would stay home and raise the children. You know, I would sacrifice my time so our children wouldn't have to sacrifice the loss of both parents being out of the house all the time.
Mm.
I wouldn't change a thing about my life. You know, where I work today with Thomasing, you know, it's satisfying. You know, it's not just it's not a job. I mean, you know, I tell people all the time, what goes on out there in that yard, that's my ministry. You know, there's men and women I get to pour into. I get to present the face of Christ to people here at work. You know, get to pour into them when guys are struggling. They know they can come in here and close this door, sit down and talk to me, and we work through stuff together. And that's probably the greatest thing about this industry, when you're given the opportunity to thrive. Look, I'm a high school dropout. You know, I quit high school when I was 17 because nobody was going to tell me what to do. You know, I got kicked out. I got kicked out of all 3 high schools in Bossier City, and kicked out of the school you go to when you get kicked out of school.
Oh, goodness.
So, you know, I wasn't stupid. I was just ADD before it was cool. You know, and they used to just try to cast it out with a wooden paddle. But you know, not everybody's designed to go to college.
Yeah.
You can provide for your family extremely well in this industry. You know, I've never met Gary Schwest. I've seen Gary Schwest, but I've been on the sidelines watching what Gary Schwest has done the last 40 years in South Louisiana, and the amount of jobs he created.
Yep.
And the amount of people he employs. You know, I watched Walter Thomas. He take this company from a little sleepy mom and pop company on the side of the bayou. You know, we're building for the Navy. We build for the Army Corps.
Right.
You know, he's employing over 500 people. You know, that's 500 families.
Yeah.
They get to eat today because they have a good paying job. And, you know, these aren't, you know, the entry level is entry level. But if you want to progress and learn, this is an excellent path forward.
You know, I completely agree, and I love your perspective, and I love your just how much you're working to improve not only your employees but the people that you have as people working for you. So I love that. Hey, when I grow up, I want to be Bill. So
Me too. I'm just gonna
Ashley
have to
may
call
not
you.
like that.
I'm gonna have to call you, Bill, get some advice.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to do this. This was nice. It was refreshing for me.
Well, it's refreshing for us, and it's so great to learn more about you and to tell your story, or to give a platform for you to tell your story, I should say, because it's one that people need to hear, and it's one that people need to understand what a great industry this is. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that, and ask, you know, go with God and go and be safe. Thank you, sir.
Same to all y'all. Y'all have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great one.
Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of Maritime in America. We're proud to highlight the voices and stories that keep the American offshore industry strong. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us, and remember, the course ahead is shaped by those who step up and steer it. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your crew. Tune in every Friday for your offshore briefing, and don't miss our next full episode, dropping soon with the very special guest's mariner's perspective. Catch you next time.